I remember when I was 18 driving through an intersection and somebody ran a red light and blindsided me and smack! Flipped my car over. I nearly lost my eye. Quite the drama. And we are wanting to make sure that you don't get blindsided and have any of that painful drama that can happen when buyer's remorse set in because you didn't have all the information that you needed to make an informed decision.
We're Joe and Charity with the Live Well Home Group, and we help people just like you every day who are considering a move to the Pacific Northwest. So in this video, we are walking you through some very important things you need to know before you buy a home in Tacoma. From septic issues to crawl space critters to the effects that the rain takes on all of our properties here at the Pacific Northwest and more. So let's jump in.
And the first thing you're going to need to know is about property tax reassessments. Now, this happens for a variety of reasons. One of them could be the house has been completely rehabbed and the old property taxes no longer match the new value that you're going to get hit with.
Another way that your property taxes might end up being more than the last person who owned it is because they had a senior exemption. So it could look like their property taxes are really low, and then you get in and your property taxes are 10 times that high. That's the reason.
The next area would be rural properties. Rural properties are sometimes classified as either forest or agricultural. When it's classified as agricultural, that means you're going to have to sell some product from the land 3 out of every 5 years and report that to the city and county. Or it's forest delineation. That is just like it sounds. That has been designated as forest and non-developable. And so those could affect it. However, when you buy that property, you will want to make sure that you understand how you're going to use that property and that it aligns with how it's been previously used. Otherwise, you're going to have to bring those taxes up to date.
Yeah, that is a very tricky one. So if you have more questions on that, feel free to just leave us a comment. One of the other ways that's really typical to see property values get reassessed is just another year passes by and the county's going to reassess your property and see what they want to charge you. And we had some significant reassessments during the COVID years when the prices of houses were going up, and they've slowed down just a little bit. But you can look online and find the history of the assessments, and you'll be able to track what's been happening with that particular property over the last several years.
Tax assessments might go up or potentially down, but usually up. One thing that is very consistent in the Northwest is rain, and that rain can wreak havoc on future expenses. Here's the things you're going to want to know about as you maintain the home that you buy in the area. And the first one that I want to highlight is your trim. Your trim around windows and doors is something that you're going to want to monitor. Not just that it has paint on it, but just to observe if there's any rot developing, because that's telling you where water will eventually get behind the trim and into your walls where things become very expensive.
Yeah, another area of trim that's really important to pay attention to, right where the gutters end on those tail ends, those are the ones where the paint usually washes off most quickly because there's a lot of water dropping off of it. And they're up high, so a lot of times people don't want to get up there and deal with them, but you need to or else it'll start to get rotted.
And speaking of gutters, you're going to want to make sure that they're pushing all the water away from your home and your foundation. The reason that's a big deal is it can cause foundation damage as well as have water underneath the home and puddling up, which could lead to other type of damage that you're going to want to avoid.
Yeah, and keeping your gutters clean is a big part of that, especially if you have trees overhanging, because once they get all filled up and clogged, you're going to have water that's spilling over the top, causing a problem, or just staying right up against your roof. So definitely gutters are very, very important in this area.
Something that is very common in the Northwest is something called a French drain system, and that goes around the base of your home and the foundation to help move that water away from your home to ensure that no damage is caused.
Speaking of potential problems lurking beneath your home, we know of some other lurkers that you want to pay attention to.
Now, we're not talking about Bigfoot, because if he lives under your home, you're probably going to be rich and famous. The main problems that we have that are critters from gophers to squirrels to raccoons and mice and rats, because they exist here in the Northwest as well. In crawl spaces specifically, it is not uncommon to see evidence of rodents. Now, that doesn't mean you shouldn't buy the home, because the reality is most of the homes up here, that is a nuisance that we have to deal with. The great thing is there are many pest control companies that will service your property and take a look at it for you, unless you like to get under your house. And if you do, good job and go for it, because you poke your head in there, you can take a look and see if you have any infiltrations underneath your home.
Now, I don't know very many people who like to go under there, but if you did, you would want to be looking for things like insulation that had been pulled down. Those sneaky little mice and rats, they want to find a nice warm place to nest, and they want to find a nice warm place to hide all their treats. So they can cause quite a bit of damage there, as well as your vapor barrier, which goes across the dirt. That can get quite muddled up with all of their mess. And there are companies that will come in and completely clean everything out to make sure to seal up all those areas where they could be getting in, so you don't have to worry about that problem.
Surprisingly, if left unmanaged, they can also get into your pipes and electrical. They could chew on PEX piping, cause water damage, and they could also chew on electrical, cause some shortage, which is going to then add further expense that maintenance would just help you avoid.
Yeah, so take care of those little critters and get them out of there. I would say critters are my least favorite problem to deal with, but if I were going to pick my second, it would be dealing with septic issues.
And depending on where you're from, you may not have any type of septic system at all, because if you're in a city, it's fully connected to the sewer system. This is not something you probably have dealt with. Especially in rural areas, it's common to have septic systems. It's not something to be afraid of, but you do need to know that maintenance matters, and the expense of those repairs could be significant. Whenever you do sell a home in the Northwest, is part of the contrast is to make sure the septic system is both pumped and functioning properly, which is great because they will last for years and years. We have a septic on our own personal home, and it has been functioning for nearly 70 years perfectly. Eventually, it'll need to be upgraded, but they do last a long time, so it's not something to be worried about, but to be aware of to make sure that you don't have some unintended expenses that could add up to $30,000 to $40,000. It is not cheap for sure.
Septic systems, as Joe mentioned, can be quite expensive to deal with, but if you're planning on not moving to a rural area, and in Tacoma, you probably won't have to deal with that, but you will potentially have to deal with some of the problems that are in the old historic homes.
Primary issues that we run into on a regular basis is electrical and plumbing upgrades over the years. Sometimes they've had it, sometimes they haven't. Now, if they've had, that is a great benefit because that'll cut down some of the unexpected costs. If they haven't, be aware during the inspection time frame to have them thoroughly looked at so that you know what you're getting into. Just because it's an old system doesn't mean that it's inefficient or is not working properly, but everything does have a shelf life. And when you get into especially galvanized piping, the shelf life is not nearly as long as it is, for example, with like copper piping. So be aware of that.
And in regards to electrical, you may run into knob and tube wiring, and it doesn't mean that you shouldn't buy the house. As Joe said, there have been people living in those houses for over 100 years without electrical, but the expense is going to go up. As well as there are a few electrical panels that are known to be very dangerous and can catch on fire. So you're going to want to research that as well. When you're having your home inspected during the buying process, the inspector will make sure that you understand everything that's going on with your electrical and your plumbing so you can make educated decisions.
Another place where hidden costs could be is in your heating system, specifically if it has old oil tanks. Now, depending on where you're from, that might not be a thing at all. In the Northwest, we do find older homes that was their primary heat source. A lot of those have been at this stage in the game decommissioned, but you'll want to make sure that they fully have been because not every lender will lend on a home if it has an oil tank. So be aware of that because it can cause problems.
And then in the negotiation, you would have to figure out who's going to pay to have this oil tank decommissioned, and there is definitely some expense that comes along with that.
A couple other issues that aren't specific just to the Northwest are lead paint and asbestos. People have lived in these homes for years, obviously, and had no adverse effects. The primary issue is disturbing them and causing dust that can get into your lungs and cause major health issues. As long as they are being mitigated in appropriate ways, there usually is no concern. However, if this is something of concern, definitely during the inspection time, that'll be called out and something that you could have another professional take a look at and give you their expert advice.
This issue is a big one, and you can run into it on newer homes as well as older homes, but since older homes have been around for a long time, you have a bigger chance, and that is foundation issues. I was in a home the other day, it was over 100 years, and I have never seen as many cracks in a foundation as I had in this house. I would just say it was just crumbling. And it was going to cost the seller $50,000 to $70,000 to make repairs. But because it was on a ravine, my clients weren't too sure that even with all those repairs, it was going to be somewhere they were comfortable living. So be aware that foundation issues can cause quite an expense. It is also something that your inspector will point out as he's doing his inspection.
Even if you avoid older homes and saying, hey, I'm just going to go with something new, safer bet, well, there are some zoning things that you'll want to be aware of because it is causing an impact on many communities throughout our area.
And that is Washington State's approval of ADUs, which is accessory dwelling units. And what these laws do is they give permission to everyone in the state to put another house on their property. Now, there are some specific incidences where it wouldn't be allowed. One would be if the lot is too small, or if it's in an HOA community that specifically says it's not allowed. But other than that, everybody gets the opportunity to potentially put one of these on the back of their property. And if the house is close to public transportation, it's possible that there could be 3 or 4 ADUs put on the same lot. Now, that makes a difference to home buyers because they want a certain feel when they move into a neighborhood, and the feel of it getting more and more compact might make you think, well, I don't want to be in this neighborhood if that's going to be possible.
The positive flip side of that is sometimes when an ADU is already established on a property, it allows for rental income to be collected, and that will help with your overarching expenses, which is a fantastic thing. Like Charity mentioned, every neighborhood has specific guidelines that you'll want to be aware of to make sure that it lines up with your future goals of your home.
And another positive note on ADUs is that it actually can increase your property value. There are quite a few people who are looking for multi-generational families, either for their aging parents or for their kids that are still in college and haven't quite been able to afford their own place. So having an ADU on the property you purchase is actually a positive thing for property values. So positive, negative with ADUs, you get to decide. But if you are thinking about buying a condo, you are going to want to know about special assessments.
I've had this happen several times with selling condos to where that there was a special assessment that was in process of getting approved by the HOA board, and we actually had to get lawyers involved to see who was responsible for paying it at closing, whether it's the seller or the buyer, and it became very convoluted. That is why you want to be aware of anything that is happening as a special assessment. It's not just condos, sometimes it's HOA communities. Often they will have to do with road improvements or water drainage systems and culverts. You don't want them to come up at the inopportune time.
Yeah, so if you're unaware of what special assessments are, you know you've got your dues for a condo or HOA dues, and you're probably hopeful thinking, wow, I'm paying all of this money. Doesn't it take care of everything? With a condo, it's supposed to take care of all the exterior. Well, it does, but sometimes there's just a larger expense for something that hasn't been upkept, and that's when a special assessment comes in, and they can be significant. I've seen $15,000, $20,000, $30,000. I've also seen a seller unable to sell their condo because there were so many special assessments and repairs needed on this condo that they were blacklisted, and there were certain types of loans that could not even be used on these condos.
The reason we're bringing this up is because Tacoma has so many wonderful condos, some of them with great waterfront views, some of them in really beautiful, quaint communities. However, if your agent doesn't know which box to check or isn't paying attention to the details, you could get stuck with an expense that the previous owner should have paid.
So what Joe is referring to is knowing how to protect yourself. And with each of the things that we highlighted today, you're going to want to make sure that you're protected. And the most important thing to do in protecting yourself is working with a good agent who is not new to contracts, who really knows the area, who really knows the problems of the area, who has a lot of history with older homes and newer homes and HOA communities and new laws and ADUs and all of those. So when you're interviewing your agent, make sure you bring up these things and you find out how much they know about all of these issues.
And if you have questions about these issues or other ones that have come to mind since listening to this, feel free to reach out to us on the number below and schedule time to go over the concerns that you have to help you make the best informed decision as you consider your move to the beautiful Pacific Northwest.
And if you've enjoyed this video, keep watching because the next video we're going to highlight the hidden costs of living in Olympia.